everyone, Alexa Dunn here, and today I am going to be talking about how to write a good romance arc. This topic has been requested many times, and if you can't tell, I've kind of put it off. What's funny is I wrote this outline 4 or 5 months ago, and I just hadn't filmed it yet because I love romance. I do technically write romances, so my first 2 books are retellings, but they're retellings of classic romances. And I'd say they're definitely heavier on the romance than they are on anything else in terms of plot. But I guess as much as I identify as a romance writer, it kind of scares me to give you concrete advice on how to write good romances, but I'm going to do my best, and so that's the thing. This is just my thoughts and ideas on how to write a juicy romance arc. Don't think of it as too prescriptive, but just hopefully helpful if you're struggling with romance or you want to try writing a romance. Hopefully this is going to help you out. I essentially wrote down all of the beats of a good juicy romance that I think you need to have. Essentially a curve, a story curve of romance beats, slightly modified from the Blake Snyder beat sheet. And as much as I'm a pantser who technically does an outline, I do actually tend to pre-plan my character arcs. If you've watched my writing process videos, you know this. And romance arcs are an intrinsic part of character arcs for me, so I actually do kind of plot out my romances before I start. I did with Brightly Burning, and I did with The Stars We Steal. Again, they were retellings of famous classic romances, but I did have these romance beats and the arc of the romance in mind. So the first thing that you want to do for your romance is to establish a baseline for the romance and the characters in that romance. Part of this is just like for your own edification, like you need to decide what the baseline is for the romance. Where are these characters going to start? Is it going to be enemies to lovers? Is it going to be friends to lovers? Is it going to be 2 people meet and they're neither friends nor enemies to lovers? Though, what is the middle ground there? You have to have some kind of conflict. So in an enemies to lovers, it's obviously that they don't really like each other and they're going to fall in love. And in a friends to lovers, it's usually some sort of unrequited emotion that forms the backbone of the character arc. Either your main character is going to be oblivious, but the reader knows that the friend loves her, or vice versa. So once you decide what that baseline of your romance is, you have to write a meet cute. It can be a literal meet cute, so the scene in which your characters meet for the first time and it's cute, dagnabbit. I mean, just think of all of the scenes in your favorite rom-coms, so it's, they run into each other on the street, or the cute conversation in the coffee shop, etc., so on and so forth. And of course, in A Hate to Love, the meet cute doesn't literally have to be cute, it can be meet hate. It's whatever the first interaction that these 2 characters are going to have on the page. It's the first meeting moment, and you want to bear in mind what your baseline is and where you want them to start and where you want to take them to. Remember that very often, I hesitate to say always, but we'll say most of the time, that meet cute moment is going to be referred back to many times in the course of the romance. The reflection of, oh, the first time we met, either, oh, I hated him, or I never knew, or whatever it is. And again, if you're doing friends to lovers, the baseline is that they know each other, so the meet cute doesn't necessarily have to be the first time they've ever met, but it is the first time you have them on the page for your readers. It's the first time the reader is meeting both of these characters in a romantic context. The next section is what I call continuation of the status quo. You're going to need to further establish the baseline of the romantic relationship after the meet cute, and this is usually going to be alongside your Act 1, though sometimes it can be in Act 2 depending on when they meet each other, but you're going to need to have a few scenes where you're reinforcing they're friends and this is the dynamic of their friendship, or man, they really butt heads and don't like each other. It's a few scenes, don't go overboard. You can have a pacing problem when you really drag out this section. You're not beating the reader over the head with it, but giving them enough nuggets of that baseline so that they start to get that tingly feeling in their tummy, so when you start to change things, this is all about building romantic anticipation and playing on tropes that people love. What's really important about this continuation of the baseline is that it'll help you avoid insta-love. This is a huge problem that can end up in romance. And when you jump from the meet cute straight into all of the romantic tension and declarations and so on, that is when it can feel like insta-love. So continuing your baseline before the next step can help combat that. And the next step is simply rising tension. You have to start building the tension in the romance. The reader should be able to see a shift. There should be a scene in which there is a demonstrable shift in the romantic dynamic. If it's friends to lovers, for example, so let's say you have a main character who loves her best friend, but he's oblivious. It might be that teasing moment where the reader goes, wait, does he love her? And then of course you're going to want to do some reversals to toy with their emotions. In Hate to Love, it's going to be that first moment of maybe there's an appreciation. Think about Pride and Prejudice. I'd say the first real moment of the rising tension is when Elizabeth walks in the rain to be with her sister Jane, and there's a moment where, you know, they're taking the turn in the room with Caroline, and like Darcy's kind of watching them, and as the reader, you know that this is the starting to build the romantic tension section. Basically, into this section, which is going to be your fun and game section of Act 2. Basically. So like it's that first part of Act 2 where you're giving them, the reader, the montage of what they signed up for, which is the rising tension, the fun tug of tension in the romance. And in every interaction they have in every scene, there should be a tiny tug of the romance aspect. Moments, basically. But at the same time, and this is what makes it hard, you also are looking for moments within those same scenes where you have little tugs and like thoughtful gestures or like little moments of connection, one character thinking something about the other. You're also going to have plenty of moments of doubt in this exact same section. It's having little things that plant seeds of, wait, well, maybe not. You can also plant misunderstandings in this section. Note, don't go overboard with misunderstandings because some people really hate romantic plots that rely heavily on misunderstandings, meaning it can be a very shallow and trite trope, but I actually like misunderstandings when they're well done, and a critical misunderstanding, especially in this section, can fuel your romance. I mean, Pride and Prejudice is literally Hate to Love based on misunderstandings and perception. Basically, this is the section where you are delicately balancing all the things. The tugs toward the positive romance, the seeds of doubt, little moments of misunderstanding. You also want to have good callbacks to that establishment of status quo section. The character thinking on the meet cute, trying to interpret behaviors. It is a delicate balance, but this is the promise of the premise. This is the fun and games section from the beat sheet. Your reader wants this section. You're giving them lots of little delicious things to hang onto. Now, my warning here again is not to drag too much because you need to get to the romantic turning point. This is more or less going to align with your midpoint turn, usually your big twist in the middle. And also don't forget, this can go alongside a book that also has a big twisty midpoint turn, but if you're also doing a romance arc alongside that, you want to align it to similar points in the book. So you essentially need a big, clear, obvious moment where the romance takes a turn. In Pride and Prejudice, this is the infamous letter. In a Friends to Lovers, it could be one of them confessing their feelings, or if you have a main character who's oblivious to the friend who's in love with her, it's her having her moment of realization. But also to confuse you, sometimes this doesn't include a moment of realization. The romantic turning point should be obvious to the reader, but doesn't always have to be obvious to the characters. I'm someone who really likes unresolved sexual tension, so really torturing the reader or being tortured as a reader through the romance arc. So sometimes this is a big turning point in the romance, and the main character doesn't necessarily have to realize that it's a turning point, but you as the reader. So for example, in A Hate to Love, it could be the other one who the main character assumes is a terrible person who hates them, does something really, really thoughtful, and it starts to maybe change the main character's mind, but us as the readers go, oh my god, he loves her, she loves her, she loves him, whatever it is, or he loves him as well, or they love them. And And then next, you have your main character actually acknowledging the turn in the romance. You need to have some sort of change in feelings / status quo. But you want to make sure there's still plenty of doubt, plenty of obstacles still to come, because you don't want to make it too easy. Going back to Pride and Prejudice as my favorite example for this video, when Elizabeth gets the letter from Darcy, that is not her turning point in the romance. It's the turning point in the romance for the readers, obviously. But her immediate reaction is anger. Her turning point is when they go on their trip and she sees his house and meets his sister. I mean, it's not entirely about the fact that he has a really nice house. And then you get to do more tension, rising tension, lots of shared looks, moments. You can do more misunderstandings. It's fine to do tons of reversals. You want to do a lot of romantic torture in this section because you are barreling toward your third act climax, whatever that is. In this section before your third act climax, or as part of your third act climax, I want you to do what I call the almost hand touch. It doesn't literally have to be the almost hand touch, but it's that moment. And yes, do you know that I got that from North and South? Because I got that from North and South. Actually, it's in the Pride and Prejudice movie as well, in the same section. It is that moment where you almost have that big romantic moment, the touching, the almost kiss, like the reader as a romance reader is like, yes, 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 and then you pull back and you torture them and you ruin whatever that moment is. Do that. That emotional moment is torture for the readers, but it's the torture that they've signed up for. This is part of or followed by the big misunderstanding, it can't possibly happen moment, the doubt of all of these buildup of moments, the no, he couldn't possibly love me, or no, he's done something too terrible and I can't, or I've done something too terrible and I can't, or he's just gotten engaged to someone else. Whatever that giant obstacle you're gonna throw in the way of your main romance pair, this is where you're going to do it. And this can be part of your third act climax. So the thing is, the beats aren't quite as cut and dried in a romance because it's going to completely depend on the specific romance you're writing. Essentially, the beats I'm going over are emotional moments to hit, and they can vary depending on the book. After that almost romance moment, you also want to do the misunderstanding it can't happen moment. It's basically to bring your readers down. This is going to be similar to the bad guys closing in beat, but it's not the dark night of the soul, which you're going to get to in a minute. It's basically to calm everything down after having your romantic reversal, like the aha moment and like an almost moment, to calm things down a little so that you can punch them in the face next. Because next is the culmination of all the things. It's a confession of love. It is a kiss. Or in adult romance, it can be sex. I mean, it can be sex in YA as well. You're just probably going to be fading to black, meaning you want a culmination, big moment, because your romance is building up to that. You're basically giving the reader what they want, and then you're gonna punch them in the face. Okay, so punching them in the face. It needs to happen after this because that big moment where things finally happen isn't the end of your book. Essentially, in some romances, that almost but not quite in that misunderstanding can be that third act climax, but in a pure romance arc, your third act climax is basically when they actually get together in some way or form. Confession of love, a kiss, and or sex. And then you have to take it all away, at least temporarily. This is when you shove your final massive obstacle in front of them so that the reader, even though they know it has a happy ending, you're basically tricking them even though they know they're being tricked. You need to throw a legitimate conflict and obstacle in front of this couple. This is usually the place where a really dark secret is revealed that stands in the way. So let's say it's a bet romance. This is when she finds out she was a bet. This is when she finds out that he has a fiance. Or this is when one party tells a lie to the other because they don't think they're good enough or there's something going on. So you basically throw the massive, huge obstacle in their way that is a gut punch after you've given them a snippet of happiness or true confession of feelings. And then you get to have angst. I mean, listen, there's been angst the whole time. If you've written a good romance, there's plenty of angst throughout. That's a lot of those moments of doubts and kind of those like little reversals all throughout. But this is when you're really going to milk it. Welcome to the dark night of the soul. This is when your character has lost everything and everything's terrible and awful and hope seems grim. And then you'll fix it. You'll do the last beat, which is reconciliation. You will fix all your problems and figure stuff out, and you'll have your big final scene of actual romantic happiness, more confessions, more kissing, etc., so on and so forth. And then you will complete it with the normal beats of a story. You know, I love a good denouement after the big resolution, and you're gonna have a great, like, final ending to it for your good, happy ending. So to compare to Pride and Prejudice again, that kind of dark night of the soul, things getting in the way moment was Aunt Catherine coming to discourage Elizabeth, which also kind of gave her hope, but then she's like, she assumes everything is lost and over, and she is definitely upset about it. And then Darcy comes to propose, and it's beautiful and wonderful and perfect. I love that book. It's one of the most famous classic romances of all time for a reason. So yeah, think about the emotions you have when you read a good romance, and think about some of the stuff I've talked about, what that kind of arc feels like. I know I didn't go into supreme detail about a lot of this, and that's because, as I mentioned, it's really hard to do so without digging into the specifics of very specific romance stories and arcs. If you want me to, I can do further videos about specific romance tropes, so friends to lovers, hate to love, etc. Though, I feel such pressure at the mere idea of working on videos like that, and yet I know it might be helpful to you, because that's the thing, every romance story is going to be slightly different depending on the tropes that you're using, the archetypes, etc. But these are basic, big, emotional beats that you're going to want to hit for your readers, because romances, good romances, are about reading experiences for the readers. You're creating an emotional arc. It's all the feelings that you feel at the pit of your stomach when you're reading a good romance. That's what you have to figure out how to do. It's way easier said than done. I'm not convinced I've helped at all. This is one of my more rambly ones where I'm like, I kind of know how to do a thing and I'm trying to articulate it for you, and I really hope I did okay. I hope it helped. Let me know down below in the comments. Do you have questions? Do you have your own favorite moments in a romance? Things you always love to read or are sure to always include in your own writing? Let's talk about writing a great romance down below in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. I will make more really long, rambly videos about how to write things where I hope I help you and don't sound like a complete idiot. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, guys, happy writing.